Hey y'all, and welcome back to Dr. Mandy Unedited. I'm Dr. Mandy, and today we're going to talk about getting the goods, y'all. We're going to talk about getting data collection methods sorted. Last week, I talked about how I survived or I didn't survive my PhD journey with ADHD, and then the week before, we talked about sampling and setting. So, if you're following along the methodological journey, consider checking out a couple episodes ago. And if you're in need of some neurospicy companionship, why don't you check out last week's episode? But this week, we are going to be talking about how to choose your data collection methods. But first, I just got to say something about whatever is on my mind in the moment. So let's have another conversation about my running game. Okay, so yesterday, look, it was pouring down rain yesterday. I think the summertime, I've talked about the weather in the UK. Oh my gosh. I think the warm summertime that everyone was calling a massive heat wave is over. Now we've got like these like serious bouts of rain that like make you think it's just gonna consistently be a doomy, gloomy day. And then by like 6 or 7 p.m., the sun comes out and you're like, what the heck? That was my whole day wasted. But, one of the things I have had to learn when living in the UK is that you just gotta go out and run, you know what I mean? No matter what. Or if you just bow to the weather, you never get out there. So I often go out and run in the morning in the rain, and I do meet like several of the same people every single morning because people have dogs, you know what I mean? And those things gotta be walked regardless of what the weather is. So there's this guy on the trail that I see like pretty much every single day. And the last time we got like a little spat of rain, he made a comment about like, oh, aren't you glad to not have to wear your rain gear or whatever? And then yesterday he was like, how can you stand running so much? And I think like he meant like because the weather was just like crap again yesterday. And I just told him that it keeps me sane. And that really is what running is for me, is just like a way to maintain my sanity. I think it's really funny because, yeah, like when I was in school and you had to like run the mile and all of that stuff, that was not for me. I always walked. I always got in trouble for walking. And now I'm just like a running maniac. But I do love when I do like when people start to notice that my writing is consistent. And they also sometimes people notice that they'll comment on my running form, which I appreciate because when I used to run in North Carolina, a lot of my school kids would see me run and they said that I look like a Tyrannosaurus Rex because I tend to keep my arms close to my body. I think that's just like a neurodivergent thing, you know what I mean? But now that I'm in the UK, a lot of people comment on how good my running form is. Maybe they just mean it in a sarcastic way. Maybe it's still like pretty crazy, but anyway, it was funny how that guy mentioned, like, how can you just stand running all the time? Yesterday, when I was just like out there pounding it in the rain. And then this morning, I think maybe he thought that he like offended me somehow because then he was just like, oh, this is just my piece, isn't it? Like, I've got to do this all the time. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many good people out there on the running trail in the morning. But anyway, let's jump into it. Let's talk about data collection. What is it? This is just how we gather information that we need that will help us analyze our findings. So, data collection methods are just a way that will help us collect that information, such as using things like interviews, surveys, and observations. Choosing your data collection method depends on a few different things. So, first, whether you are using qualitative or quantitative approaches. So, if you are using a qualitative approach, you're going to stick to methods that give you some rich word data. If you go with a quantitative approach, you'll stick with methods that are going to give you numbers. And then, of course, if you're doing like a mixed method situation, you get to kind of pick and choose, and it's really still important that you take the time to choose data collection methods that will get you the answers that you need. So it also really depends on your research questions and your world view. So you're going to choose between 1 and 3 methods. If you're doing a specific, maybe like a quantitative study, you could probably get away with sticking to just like one focus method if you want, depend on what you're doing. But you may choose two if you want to sharpen the perspective of qualitative research. So, such as you interview people one on one for their, individual perspectives, but then you have an observation that really reveals the relational dynamics and unspoken behaviors that those little, nuances can really add to your data. And then choosing 3 methods helps you really triangulate data. So if you're not familiar with triangulation yet, triangulation is just simply when you have 3 data methods and they are all working together to say the same thing. So when you collect data from each of these data collection methods and you look at what it is, they're saying the same thing. And what that does is it creates credibility and depth in your research. All right. So if you are using 3 data collection methods, yeah, this helps you achieve that. And so, you might choose combinations such as focus groups, interviews, and document analysis. And you really aren't going to choose more than 3 because that just becomes unmanageable. Remember, like most things in research, people do have the tendency when they're just starting out research that they want to throw all of these different elements in, but in most cases, it just is becomes unmanageable and it doesn't keep your research focused. So you're probably never going to use more than, 3 methods for a single project. If you're working on like, big projects that have like a bunch of different elements like I do in research, you will have several different kind of data collection methods in the works, but there will be individual research elements that will only have 1, 2, or 3 data collection methods. So if you're choosing multiple methods, which many of us probably are, you do want to be strategic and complementary. Okay, so I'm going to use an example of what I did. I chose interviews, blog posts, and artifacts. Okay, so, an interview often reveals, like, I think, like the surface. It's like when someone's talking to you, they don't necessarily know you. They're not going to necessarily reveal all the facts. Of course, they train us as researchers to be able to, make a connection with that person, but it's still, like, often probably like the first or second time that we've met them. So, they're probably only going to tell you what they're generally comfortable with saying. And so I simply chose this method because it's a core method for like phenomenological studies. Like if you want to understand the lived experience of somebody, of course, you got to interview them. And then I chose blog posts. So the blog post, I think it was a prompt, something like tell somebody that's interested in starting a homeschool co-op what your best advice is. And with that blog post, that means when that person is writing it, they have more room to like collect and develop their thoughts in private without you as the researcher looking in at them. And they might say things more candidly, especially since like the topic is like probably very personable and talking about, giving advice to somebody else. So that's why I chose the blog post to really see like the underneath passion of homeschool co-op leaders. And finally, I chose artifacts. And so I think that artifacts help really reveal what is unspoken. I had my participants show me an artifact that showed how they were successful as leaders. And so the different variations of artifacts that these people showed me really helped me identify exactly what each person viewed as success and how they interpreted it through their actions. And yeah, we've already mentioned a lot of data collection methods, but yeah, let's just go over some popular ones just in case these are not on your radar yet. Of course, you got individual interviews. So these are just one-on-one, in-depth, personal interviews, and these are typically used in qualitative methods. Maybe if you were again looking to understand the lived experience of a certain group of people. And don't quote me on the exact numbers because it varies. And I know that there are some like research books out there that will give you a good perception of what you should be shooting for. But I typically see around the area of 15 interview questions. But that also includes, as they talk about in research books a lot of time, that grand entry question. So that kind of icebreaker question that is going to help participants really get comfortable with you. And then you have surveys and questionnaires, and these are great for like breadth, so like getting a lot of answers, but not always the underneath depth to those answers. So this is just simply, writing a survey, sending it out, or a questionnaire, sending it out to like 100 strangers, and this is typically used for quantitative data. You have focus groups. This is a really popular method to pair with interviews often. So, focus groups are just when you have a specific group of people that you are going to interview together. And this is always a good way to have participants like play off of each other and inspire each other to say things that they necessarily wouldn't have revealed on their own. And because people are maybe like in a group of their own kind of species, if you will, they will probably act different around each other than they will around you as the researcher. And then, yeah, you've got stuff like observations as well. An observation is just like where you're going to go, you're going to observe groups or behaviors. You also, as I mentioned, you have artifacts where, you have something, a physical object that you might analyze. And that kind of goes hand in hand with document analysis, where you will look at documents and analyze specific behaviors in that. So again, you need to choose wisely with these. As I have said over and over again, you also do need to think about feasibility. So, for example, if you choose, a lot of people will do interviews for qualitative data, but say if you want to choose maybe like an artifact or a document situation to complement that data collection, then something to keep in mind is that you might actually need like specific permission from the participant, permission from an organization. You might have to get some sort of ethical permission before you can get permission from people to use their documents and personal effects. And some last thoughts on that is just, ask yourself what kind of knowledge are you trying to create? Consider your participants. How might they best express themselves? And yeah, again, ethically, like, will these methods that you choose protect your participants? Or will it accidentally expose them in some way? Anyway, that is enough from me. I think next week we are going to talk probably about reflexivity and a couple of other things. But reflexivity is a super, super, super important part of research that I don't think a lot of people take seriously enough. So we are going to talk all about what it is and how to practice it so that your research remains, as credible and as valid as possible. In the meantime, if you need some help with your dissertation or just writing or a journal article, make sure you get a hold of me. You can get a hold of me either through my email at mandykf, that's MANDIEKF, at gmail.com, or you can check it out on my website, www.drmandyedits.com. If you want to see what else I am doing in my life, you can check out my social media. That is on the link tree below in the description. Other than that, I hope someone tells you that you look good while running this week, okay? All right, go get some exercise. See ya. Bye.